listening to Informed Dissent. If you're a longtime listener, welcome back. If you're new, welcome, and here's the lay of the land. I'm Jamie Reed, a lesbian and a whistleblower who worked inside a pediatric gender center. My co-host, Lauren Leggieri, is a lesbian and a longtime LGBT advocate. Our co-host, Cori Cohn, is a gay man who underwent gender transition early in his life. All three of us come from the left, and none of us fit the story you've been told about who questions gender medicine. And that's not an accident. Every week we cover the headlines you need to know across medicine, law, sports, schools, and prisons. And then we dig in. The three of us, together, and most weeks, a guest worth hearing from. We built this show because we believe that the most important conversations about gender politics are the ones happening between people with real stakes and real disagreements. Free inquiry, honest argument, and dissent that's worth something because it's actually informed. We welcome you.
Hello and welcome to Informed Dissent. I'm Lauren, and here is your news of the week. A WPATH conference video published this week by Benjamin Ryan shows child psychiatrist Scott Leibowitz telling colleagues in 2022 that age limits were removed from WPATH's treatment guidelines to protect clinical criteria. The internal emails tell a different story, however. Biden HHS official Rachel Levine pressured WPATH to remove the ages for political reasons, fearing that they would trigger legislation restricting trans care. A federal judge vacated the Kennedy Declaration on April 18th, blocking the administration's attempt to cut Medicare and Medicaid funding from hospitals providing pediatric gender interventions. The ruling was procedural. The judge did not rule on whether the treatments are safe and effective. And finally, the largest procurers of tiki torches, the Southern Poverty Law Center, was indicted this week by the DOJ on 11 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. The SPLC secretly funneled more than $3 million in donor funds to informants inside white supremacist groups. We'll be digging deep into this story with our guest. That's your news of the week. On to the show.
Hi, and welcome to Informed Dissent. I'm Jamie Reed with my two co-hosts, Cori Cohn and Lauren Leggieri. And this morning, we are going to talk about two big stories in the news this week. The first one is a daring story of a child kidnapping that included trans-identified men walking across the Canadian border and flying to Cuba. And then the FBI sending a plane to go retrieve them, which we'll get into the details of this story. I think the both of you read this and found it profoundly shocking.
No. Do I find it shocking that a trans-identified male would kidnap a child, bring him to Cuba for a sex change? No. This seems... What I'm surprised by is it's not happening more often.
Were you surprised that the New York Times covered it?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
The way they covered it, though, it was like, yes, I was surprised at the angle they took, but it's like they took that angle, but still were beholden to a bunch of language tricks, and reading it felt like I was having a stroke. So
let's share with the audience a little bit about this story's background first, and then we'll get into the coverage and how crazy or not crazy it was that the federal government got involved. So this is a divorced couple who live in Utah. They have a son, a male child, who is now 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The parents have a shared custody agreement. It sounded like a standard shared custody agreement where one parent is allowed to take the child on a vacation, but when you take your kid on vacation, you have to legally tell the other parent, where are you going?
Yep.
You have to leave your phone on and be accessible in case something comes up. And the dad in this story now identifies as a woman and was taking the child, they claimed, on a camping trip in Canada. And they had told mom, these are the hotels we're going to be at. And they were supposed to be gone for a week. And mom caught wind of something going on. I think mom was already worried something was going to happen. Because what I think occurred was she knew which hotel they were supposed to show up at. And she found out pretty quickly they never checked into the hotel. She basically was, hey, where's my kid? I also think in the custody dispute, it had been ongoing that the child's trans identification. So I don't know if I said this, but the dad, who's claiming to be mom, also claims that the male child is trans also.
Wow.
And
have we checked to see if the stuff's contagious?
I don't know if contagion is the right word in this case. I think that this is a parental.
Well, you remember, we know that when you use like the gels, the testosterone gels or the estrogen gels.
I don't even think it was that.
Okay.
Yes.
It can transfer to family members.
The actual hormone can.
That's right.
Yes. But I think that this is a case where the trans identification of the child was in part because it was encouraged or pushed by the parents. And even the New York Times story recognizes that others in the family thought similarly. I can read you the quote. So according to the filings, the 10-year-old child, they don't identify by name, split time living with these divorced parents. Dad name is now Rose, and Rose has a partner named Blue, but the family members, so I'm already in the weeds here. Rose's brother, Steve, told the Times on Tuesday that Rose, dad, had been, quote, rather adamantly pushing for the child to get transition surgery since the child was about 5 years old. The brother, the uncle, said he would have been supportive of this child's gender identity had it seemed to be the child's choice. But, quote, this seemed to be clearly all be coming from Rose. It was heartbreaking and hard for me to see.
To be clear, Rose is the father and is a man.
A Rose by any other name.
I just think it is important to be clear because you really have to read this article carefully to understand what's happening.
Well, so I actually asked a lawyer friend, hey, can you hunt down the actual court filing? And he did, and he was able to provide the court filing. And I will say that the court filing read in a way that was much clearer to someone from the outside, not, purview to who all these people were. It was the New York Times who made this more convoluted than it needed to be. The actual court filing was pretty clear that this was the dad who was identifying as a woman in this case. So what happens next, though, is they never make it to the hotel. And what's also, sidebar, super interesting is that in the court filing, it appears that they flew to Washington State and they walked across the border into Canada. And in a tiny, small world, Lauren and I have been to that border crossing. Lauren, what is your recollection of that Peace Bridge border crossing in Canada?
Right. It is, there's nothing there. It's just open fields. There's nothing there. So I feel like it would be very obvious if a family of three were walking into Canada from there. Like, I don't know how anyone could miss them. It's not like it's a heavily trafficked area. I mean, it is with cars, but it's just a highway into large fields.
So this is from the actual court filing. On March 29th, 2026, at approximately 15:45 hours, the group, dad's partner named Blue, who also might be a trans-identified man, I don't know for sure.
I sure hope that Rose and Blue are in a throuple with Marigold.
It says in this, though, they crossed the US-Canadian border by foot from Blaine, Washington into Surrey, British Columbus, via the Douglas Peace Arch Port of Entry pedestrian crossing. They then flew from BC, Canada to Mexico City, Mexico. The Mexican immigration authorities confirmed their arrival, and then they flew from Merida, Mexico to Havana, Cuba, and that is where they were eventually picked up by the FBI, and Blue and Rose are now in custody for a child kidnapping.
We should use the last names because this is too ridiculous. By the way, it's not funny to kidnap a child and bring them to Cuba for a sex change. That's not funny.
It's not funny. It's also dumb because they don't do sex change surgeries on children in Cuba.
It was probably just a layover.
To go where?
Who knows?
Okay.
Maybe Iran.
This doesn't seem like a sane group here. They walked into Canada. They're trying to get a sex change surgery for a 10-year-old. Like, can we just call a spade a spade? This is crazy people abducting a kid. What is crazy too, but what is even more crazy is that the FBI sent a plane. So mom had to know somebody.
I'm going to read one other part of the actual court custody filing. It says searches of Rose and Blue's residence revealed numerous, quote, to-do lists. So they left a whole bunch of post-it notes around, including their packing lists and notes. One of the notes included, quote, learn Spanish and information on their flights to Canada, Mexico, and Cuba. The other note, located nearby, had on the checklist, get haircuts and withdraw $10,000 cash. Leave with Nikki, confirm the Cuba baggage limit, and empty their U.S. bank account. An additional note recovered included instructions from a mental health therapist located in Washington, D.C., including the instruction to send the therapist $10,000 and instructions on the gender-affirming medical care model for children.
Was this paid for by the Southern Poverty Law Center? That's what I want to know.
Well, maybe we should ask the FBI to trace where that $10K in their emergency savings came from. The New York Times covered the case. I think, as we've noted, they easily confuse the readers as to who is whom is whom.
Can I just read this one paragraph that made my brain melt? Two women from Cache County, Utah, Rose and Blue Anessa Ethington, were arrested by the FBI and are now facing federal kidnapping charges according to the filings. Rose, one of the child's biological parents, shares custody with the child's biological mother, identified. Okay. Rose, one of the child's biological parents, shares custody with the child's biological mother. There used to be a word for that. that would have been very clear. That would have made sense to everyone. And father. I think they could have replaced those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 words with the word father, and it would have been pretty clear. So I just wanted to. They are the mental loops that the New York Times is making readers jump through to understand the story they're trying to bring to them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go on. I just wanted to highlight how insane that is.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
No.
I'm going to read the headline from the Advocate magazine on their coverage.
Yeah. I was just, yeah.
Their headline reads, FBI sends plane to Cuba to stop a trans kid from accessing gender-affirming care.
Love it.
Subtitled, The Child Was Returned to the United States and the parents now face federal kidnapping charges.
Just one parent.
Well, I think that the blue, I think the blue is also, the blue person was also in custody.
Okay.
So there we have it. Cori, your takeaway is none of this is surprising.
It would take a lot right now to surprise me. I mean, to be fair, it would take a lot to surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the general public reading this, number one, if they can get through it and understand who's who and what's what, is going to assume that this is a very rare fluke of a circumstance. But I am, but I am not surprised by the behavior of this father, and I don't think Cori is either.
Younger listeners might remember, or might not remember, but it used to be that when you would go to the grocery store, to the checkout line, you know where I'm going?
No.
There's all of these magazines, these weekly magazines that would be at the checkout line. They'd be like, aliens abducted my pet goldfish.
They found Amelia Earhart again.
That's right. So it's all of these headlines that are just absolutely bonkers headlines. You'd go to the grocery store and there'd be the World Weekly News and the National Enquirer, and there's all these gossip racks. And this is exactly what you would see as a headline.
Yeah.
Trans mom kidnaps child for sex change in Cuba. Like you wouldn't even blink. That's that. And in fact, if you have access to the archives, there's probably something that's only 1 degree different from that.
Yeah.
Cori, I originally thought you were going to bring up the case for the younger listeners of, wasn't it Elian Gonzalez?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the reverse Elian.
Yeah, there was another kidnap kid custody case that is hugely profiled.
A Cuban child brought to the United States.
Whatever happened with him? Did he go back?
Yeah, this was under Bill Clinton's presidency.
They sent him back to Cuba?
Yeah, they took him and brought him back to Cuba.
I will just say I had not really dug into what the trans policies were in Cuba until this story broke. It does appear that for adults, transition is covered by their National Health Service. However, it's only for adults. No foreign nationals can access it, and they often have no ready supplies of drug or, I mean, it's a system that says that if you're an adult who identifies as trans in Cuba, you can access this. They just don't really often have it available. This kid is not Cuban, would not have had access unless they had some sort of black market hookup through this Washington, D.C. therapist.
Stranger things have happened in the last 5 minutes. So anything's possible.
Okay.
I will say, if you're writing notes to yourself, like learn Spanish on the airplane, I don't think that you can be given credit for being a very good planner.
You can't. Also, here's another stupid question. Why didn't they just stay in Canada?
That's not where the surgeon was.
Okay, but that's where
I'm just gonna also point out again that these are crazy people, so trying to rationalize through their actions here might be futile.
Do we have another story? I want to talk about this one.
We do, and I think you should kick us off. Tell us the background. Where are we at, and what is your part in this saga?
It's a bit part, but there's a thing called the Southern Poverty Law Center, and
Y'all may have heard of it.
Is that still their name, or is their name now is it SPLC?
I think it's
No, it's still Southern Poverty Law Center.
So it was created by I guess he was an attorney that was busting the KKK, and he was able to get any number of KKK leaders out of business. I don't know what KKK does for business. I suppose they sell accelerants, but he started the Southern Poverty Law Center about 40 years ago to become a permanent institution to fight extremism and hatred. Interestingly enough, the guy who created it, sorry, I don't have his name, but the culture of the SPLC was itself not very positive. There have been any number of lawsuits from employees of the SPLC for how they've been treated over time. But one of the things to take away is that they're not exactly adherent to the ethical standards that we consider to be important. And that matters this week because they were indicted by the FBI for wire fraud as indicted. Yeah, a grand jury indicted them because they're accused of making payments to quote unquote informants, but essentially members embedded in United States hate groups that the Southern Poverty Law Center also publicly fights and fundraises off of fighting. So one way of thinking about it is, do you have the numbers on screen? I've had these before. I didn't realize I was gonna get tossed the
background. Also, yeah, the little ding, was that your bank account notifying you that you're getting deposits?
Yeah, that was my deposit from the SPLC.
Okay, let me give you a couple.
Well, I wanted to say they have an endowment that's somewhere around $700 million. And the last time I pulled their tax filings, they're getting somewhere between 70 and $100 million fundraising every year for their mission. And I know you're shaking your head, Jamie, like you can't even believe it. But they've got a really smart model, which is pay the racists to be eye-catching and then fundraise off of it, which is kind of brilliant. But apparently a grand jury thinks that it's not proper to do payments to these people the ways that the SPLC is accused of doing it.
Can I play devil's advocate though for a minute? Didn't the FBI used to pay informants in all sorts of civil rights groups and had similar tactics where they had infiltrated groups and pushed people to become more extreme or violent? Didn't the FBI do similar?
Maybe. And as long as you phrase it that way, Jamie, I guess what we should do is give the SPLC a pass and then just forget about it.
I don't think that they get a pass and we should forget about it. I think what was very jaw-dropping in kind of the court releases that the FBI put out was the sheer numbers. Paying an informant to me is like, I got one guy who we maybe gave 10 grand and he's completely embedded and we're making sure he eats. And the numbers were in the hundreds of thousands that they were paying. What, like one group was $270,000. That's excessive.
It's expensive to live in poor rural areas in the South.
But isn't there also the additional consideration that the SPLC is a national nonprofit, and they have a responsibility to tell donors where their money is going, and report where their money is going. So there's a whole other level that's kind of fraudulent there.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, right? You can't, like, nobody knew that they were giving the literal KKK hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if they did, would they be donating to SPLC?
I mean, I wouldn't be donating to any of these orgs.
And then there was the other element where they made shell companies and shell corporations to dispense this money that were set up to make sure that it couldn't be connected to SPLC easily. Like, there was an obvious intent here. I mean, like, they're setting up shell corporations to funnel money to the KKK. This is crazy.
And other hate groups.
And other hate groups, while they fight hate groups and bring in money from donors to fight hate groups.
So one of the things we're going to cover shortly with our stellar lineup of guests today is going to be that somehow the Southern Poverty Law Center spills over into the gender critical world in very interesting ways, which we're going to cover with our guests.
Good.
What I want to discuss with you two is, first of all, Cori, I know you're saying it's a bit part, but I feel like you've been in this, whatever you'd call it, a gender critical kind of movement for a long time. And this had come up back in 2022, where you were already making known, or you were online in some engagement with leadership at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Can you just kind of explain what happened? Because I feel like Andy No just pulled up some of those old receipts.
So, I like talking to people. And I don't mind, I prefer actually talking to people who think differently than I do. And I was trying to engage. There's a man who was, I think he was a researcher, not a leader, at the Southern Poverty Law Center. He might have had a fellowship, named Michael Edison Hayden. And he and another employee at the Southern Poverty Law Center, Hannah Geis, I just messaged them publicly on X and was like, we should talk about this stuff instead of just jumping to conclusions. I do want to say Heather Geis, Gais, is kind of her own sort of lol cow. She has been written up before for making coded threats to administration officials. So
did you say lol cow?
Yeah, this is I think I've explained this term before, lol cow. It's somebody who's you make fun of on the internet because they have personality issues that just come up over and over.
Not because of their hats.
No, it's because of their personalities.
Okay. So she's a lol cow.
Yeah, I want to make clear one of the reasons why I work so hard not to have one.
What?
I don't think that Jamie understands lolcow, and I think that we should just move on.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Check the show notes from a couple shows ago, Jamie. I think we talked about this. So
I understand things, just not all of these things.
it's fine. So I'd been talking to Michael even in September, and I even invited him to come on to my other podcast that I do with my friend Nina Paley called Heterodorks.
Every time.
What?
Go on.
Just go on with the story.
I was interrupted. And when I invited, I had this long chat with Hayden, because I do want to try to make friends of people. And I invited him on the show to talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center and its criticisms of gender critical viewpoints. And he said, I would do your show, but I don't want to help launder some kind of Jesse single bullshit. So that's why I haven't responded. And then he said,
So I would do your show, except I don't want to talk. I don't want to actually engage in dialogue with you. Okay.
Well, he doesn't want to be accused of being a Jesse Single type of person. And then he said, I like being nice to people, but I simply don't like that type of shit. And so that was kind of the end of our text private DM conversation. But then a couple of weeks later, he was talking about Richard Spencer. And we have an argument about Richard Spencer. And I think Hayden was trying to kind of wash Spencer's personality a bit.
Who can you explain to us?
Richard Spencer was a provocateur. I think he is famous for being punched in the face for wearing a SS armband in public. And then Richard Spencer's another one of these lol cows, right? He's a lol cow. And because one of the things that he likes is attention, he made this big turn. Like I guess Richard Spencer also helped organize the Unite the Right rally that was in Charlottesville. So a couple of years later, he makes this big turnaround saying, I'm not like that anymore. I've come to see the error of my ways. And so I'm arguing with Michael Edison Hayden about this. And I said, what do I think is more likely, that Richard Spencer is an honest dealer and we should take his words at face value? Or do I think Richard Spencer would say things to provoke responses or sow chaos? And this SPLC, I think he was a fellow at the time, he says, knowing considerably more about Richard and his activism than you do, I would suggest treating the subject with a little more humility. Which is, it's funny. Me having an opinion on Richard Spencer needs to be, anyway. So he says, so I said, Michael, it doesn't surprise me at all that you prescribe humility for others. But since you're the expert, do you believe, and by the way, this was written in 2022. I use an M dash. This is not written with AI. I just write with M dashes, okay? But since you're the expert, M dash, do you believe that Richard Spencer is now a moderate, as he claims? And Michael Edison Hayden replies to me and he says, not talking about this publicly, but you don't know what's going on.
Oh, wow.
And this is just, this is like an exchange almost 4 years ago on the internet that I don't think about every day.
Yeah, like wink, wink, nod, nod. You don't know that he's secretly working for us.
Well, that's the implication here.
It is the implication, yeah.
So I didn't, when the news broke about the SPLC, I was like, oh yeah, I remember when I had an argument with one of their researchers, and then I didn't think anything of it. And this morning, Andy No is sending that screenshot around, and I go on X. I'm not part of X anymore, but I go on Knitter, which is a way of getting around X. And I search for my former X username. And my gosh, there's all sorts of mentions of me having this conversation with this SPLC dude. Like, I don't think about it, but apparently other people do.
Somebody remembered it.
Somebody did. So the bottom line is, I guess I bring out the best in people.
Also, Andy No is so good at finding receipts and finding
Yeah.
things on the internet. I actually reached out to him about this story, and he's traveling this week. Otherwise, he was going to join us. I would say he's a friend of the pod.
Yeah. But he's not on yet.
Not yet. He will be.
True.
Can I ask this on a serious note? Have we needed an organization like the Southern Poverty Law Center in the United States in the past 2 decades?
I don't understand. Are you asking, have we need organizations that attempt to fulfill the mission that SPLC claims it's pursuing? Or do we need organizations like the SPLC as it actually functions?
I think is there still even a need in this country for, I will say this, their website, the first line says, the Southern Poverty Law Center stands as a beacon of hope, fighting white supremacy and various forms of injustice to help create a multiracial democracy where we can all live and thrive.
I'm not sure what that means, because the last that I checked, we are already in a multi-racial democracy.
I mean, I don't know. Like, my brain's just like spun all around about this. Like, do we need it? I don't know, because would we have the extremes that we have now if there weren't institutions like Southern Poverty Law Center who were feeding extremists to keep itself in business? I don't know now. I don't know. I mean, I feel very betrayed by an institution that, you know, I think a lot of people put a lot of faith in.
I think
And believed in the mission, and now it's like, was the mission even there, or was it totally manufactured? That's what's really, it's very sad.
I think this is where we fast forward 20 years into the future, and the Jamie Reed is indicted by the FBI for making payments to trans activists to kidnap children and bring them to Cuba for sex changes.
Okay, well, so first of all, there'd have to be money to give. Second of all, I just don't think that's a good strategy. I just, strategically speaking, you're too reliant on too many factors, that the media would even cover it, that it would even do what you wanted it to do. I'll say this, I feel like the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ACLU, and NPR were all lefty institutions that were, especially NPR, a part of my daily life that have now been completely eroded. I have no confidence in any of them anymore. And I wonder this. I wonder, because for me, ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, and NPR were what broke them was trans.
Maybe.
The cracks in legitimacy and my trustworthiness and my sense that
okay,
being honest.
I see.
What to me they all broke under was gender ideology, that trans broke them all. I wonder if I'm just too naive and I am too in the weeds on trans to know if they were broken long before.
But that's what I'm saying, is like, I feel the same way, is that so many of these institutions that I trusted broke from me with trans. Like, they're broken. They've lost their way. But with this SPLC, it's not even about trans. It's about something else that I believed in, there's so many institutions that I think I still believe in so much of what you do, but you've got this so wrong. And it's just,
You'll
now I'm
always
like,
have
I
the
don't know.
IRA.
Was it trans that broke it, or were they broken before I realized they were broken? Because trans is so extreme and so in your face. I don't know. That's the thing, is I think so many disaffected liberals are looking and they're just like, wow,
How about
was it all a lie?
can I pitch a really crazy hypothesis?
Please.
I love these crazy hypotheses. So if we think about Robert Keegan's adult developmental model of psychology, we go from like there's different phases of child psychology also, but the earliest phase of adult psychology is called the socialized mind. And at this point, you want to be part of a group. You want to be included. You want to have a place because you haven't reached the point of maturity yet of trusting your own counsel, basically. And so these institutions actually have a pretty important role for young people. It gives them a sense of identity and clarity and something that they can align with, because becoming an individual is hard. You start off as a child being basically an accessory for your parents. Then at some point, hopefully, you become a whole complex and thoughtful human being. Now, not all adults make it past the socialized mind level of maturity. But I think that the experience that you're talking about of I used to really believe in these groups and now I don't, may itself be linked to your evolution of your mental model, your adult model, from the socialized mind to the the next one is the self. It's right at the tip of my tongue. I just forgot. It's the next level where basically you start to develop values that you judge your own self by. You don't judge yourself by on whether you've been included in the group or not, but you judge yourself on the ideology that you believe in and how adherent you are to your ideological beliefs.
Yes, all that could be true.
Self
Or
yeah,
everything I believed in could have been a fraud all along.
self-authoring mind.
Yeah.
Cori, did you have institutions that you used to trust and believe in? Sometimes I feel like you kind of float in as like a wise sage and you're like, I never believed in any of this nonsense that you liberals did. I've been a libertarian all along.
I'm sure that I had that phase. I'm sure I did. It's hard for me to think of clear examples of where I really believed it. I was an NPR supporter for a long time, not because I really believed that NPR was so great, but I thought that it was important to have a news source that was not commercially supported. Right. I thought that not depending on commercial pay would eliminate some of the reporting slant that would be present in the commercial news. But that was an incorrect belief because I did not account for other forms of bias.
I just want to add one more institution to my list of those who have broken my heart. So it will be NPR, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Amnesty International. And that was my very first one. And when you were talking about feeling a part of a group, and that was huge for me in high school. And I was, an elected leader and traveled and did a lot with Amnesty. It worries me though that the replacement, if those institutions that were formative for me as a young person have all basically, I have no trust in them anymore. It does make me worried that young people don't have any institutional groundings with which to provide some structure. I think a lot of those orgs also took the place of what in American civilization, years and decades past, would have been your local church or your local, yeah, like, so when church fell away and you didn't have youth group and you didn't have, you know, like a weekly or even like multiple times a week thing for young people to be a part of, or even kids, these other institutions stepped in and said, we can provide moral compass or ethical grounding, or we can talk about, you know, the ways to make civilization in our societies better. And if we don't have those institutions to trust either, and most people have fallen away from the church, I think we're leaving real gaps in our society where people don't have community structure with which to work within.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one of the things I'm worried about at the moment is that the most natural thing to start filling that gap for the youngest generation is artificial intelligence, where they go into chatbots and the chatbot tells them everything that they want to hear. The chatbot is endlessly helpful in creating a context and explanation for young people. So however these things are trained, that's what we're going to see 10, 15 years from now in the adult population.
Are any of these orgs redeemable, or are they just...
No.
Okay, well, on this episode of Let's Get Super Depressed Before the Day Starts.
Who's depressed?
I'm a parent, and I like the concept that our society will continue to function into the future.
Let me give you this is the best advice that I can give you. Our society is post-capitalist. It is ultra-industrialized, and it's being taken over by artificial intelligence. The very best thing that you could do for your children is to take them to a country which does not have all of this modernization. And even if you have to kidnap them, I would take them to Cuba.
Welcome to our guest today. We have Elsbeth Seifer, and we asked her to join us because we needed some legal assistance discussing what happened this week for this huge case that broke regarding the Southern Poverty Law Center, the FBI, and then gender, because somehow this is a case that intersects with so many of us in our reality in kind of the gender world. So, first of all, Elspeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And just to, maybe briefly, can you explain how you know way more about the law than Lauren or I do?
Sure. In the 80s.
Oh, we're back in the 80s.
We're back in the 80s. I
Okay.
went to law school. And I then practiced for a short period of time as a defense attorney with a very small firm, and then worked as a prosecutor for many years, actually, and mostly focused on appellate work, though I did do some trials. But I was mostly in the appeals court in the state appeals court. Then I was appointed to the Appeals Court of Massachusetts in the year 2000 by Governor Paul Cellucci, who in those days was considered a Massachusetts Republican, meaning, he's in the Republican Party, but he's really A-OK. And then so I spent 17 years on the intermediate state appeals court, and then I was appointed by Charlie Baker to the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, which is the highest court in the state. It's court of review. It's like being on the Supreme Court of your state. It is being on the Supreme Court of your state. And we like to always say that we were the oldest continuing court in the Western Hemisphere, because our origins are 1692, when the governor replaced the then sitting court of oyer and terminer with a court of judicature to put a stop to the witch trials. So Massachusetts always takes that history very proudly and extends it through many, many things, but I have not been finding that they're extending it to women lately.
How fascinating.
Yeah.
So the news breaks, was it yesterday or the day before?
Yeah.
The Justice Department has alleged that there have been a number of financial crimes that have occurred at the or by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is it's an American nonprofit. And some of those crimes include wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Can you explain, what are these crimes? What are they alleged to have committed?
Yeah, it's tricky. I don't like starting out that way, but wire fraud is a very specific crime in the federal statute, and it would be any time you send something across the wires, or the imaginary wires we have now, and because it involves interstate commerce, it becomes a federal issue. And because of that, too, the wires being banks usually, or it's like ACH transactions, if you've ever been paid automatically into your bank. That's how the wires work. And so they've always taken wire fraud and postal fraud, at least, very seriously along the many years I've been around. And so this one, wire fraud, they had multiple counts of it, and they have to prove. The main element is going to be to show that they did this with fraudulent intent. So when they engaged in their transactions to pay these alleged informants, you'd have to show that by doing that, you're intending to deceive either the bank, and it looks like they were trying to deceive the bank because they had fake names to the bank for these companies they were paying, and they went to a lot of trouble to create a shell structure around everybody, so around the people in the who were working for the Poverty Law Center. So they keep that shell around them to keep them all protected and anonymous. So say the head king of the Ku Klux Klan's name is not on their records as having paid him. They pay somebody else through a little shell company they've set out, and they create a fictitious name for him and get him a bank account. And so their money comes in from you, the donor, who are donating to fight racism. I believe, it says law center in their name, so I assume they want to do legal things, right? So we would think you're going to defend people who've been unjustly accused, or you're going to find justice for somebody who was hurt, for a race crime or something like that. So you have to show that the donor is relying on the representation you're making. That here's what I'm going to take your money, but then they put it through all these little processes so that it becomes hard to find, and they end up paying all these guys, assume they're men, in all of these right-wing. I know they would be upset being called a hate group, but that's what SPLC would call them. So they're working with them.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be hard to prove, I think, that the donor relied on the representation made by the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is going to require a lot of paperwork to see.
Are you saying that Southern Poverty Law Center would have to prove that they weren't trying to deceive their donors in creating shell companies and funding people in the KKK?
Burden of proof will never shift. The government is going to have to prove that's what they were trying to do.
And you think that the government has a hard case
I
in
think they
proving
have a
that?
hard case because historically, fraud depends on intent. And intent is always very hard to prove in court, unless you're in somebody's head or unless you have a statement. Or you take a pattern like we have here. Here we have pattern. So maybe you can start to infer intent. But for the fraud to work, it has to be that the person giving you the money had to be relying on the statement you're making.
Well, I don't
So,
think the Southern Poverty Law Center ever made statements saying that we frequently funnel money to informants of hate groups. I don't think
right,
anybody knew that they were ever even doing that. Like
right.
when I heard they're paying informants, I was like, "What? What the
I
hell?"
know, I know. It is not what one would expect. However, I have to do a disclosure that the organization I'm on the board of directors of, Wolf Women's Liberation Front, is listed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group. So, I didn't think we'd be there either, but this is a very strange thing to be doing. And it's going to be a paper case, a heavy paper case.
So that leads me to my next question then. So, did the Justice Department already get through an initial grand jury? Did they have enough to take to a grand jury to at least, is the word indict?
Yes, the words indict. And I think one thing that has been very good about having Jeanine Pirro as a U.S. attorney in New York is you can no longer say that you could indict a ham sandwich because their indictments have failed terribly, right? But this one, they did have to get through a grand jury. And the thing is, this, you can't, some people I saw online wanted to say, oh, it must be Blanche doing this, not, it wasn't, see, once we changed AGs, we're great. But it's not, this one would have been started a long time ago, probably when the DOJ first started under Trump. It would take a long time to investigate this and put it together. So it's not just because Blanche is there now and Bondi isn't.
Right, there was probably a good deal of investigation before this to even get
One
it to
would
a grand
hope.
jury. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
hesitate to say, oh, of course I would, because nothing is stable anymore in terms of our perceptions
Yeah.
and reality of what's happening and how we're running the justice system. But yes, there would have been an awful lot of work put in a normal situation on a case like this. Um, and it's interesting to me that we don't have names. I mean, I can see them protecting their informants, but they're going to have to at some point demonstrate more of this, how this fraud worked. I mean, if they were just getting information, that's one thing. But if you're encouraging something or facilitating something, that's another. They've cleverly structured these indictments though, so that I don't think they have to go there. I think they just have to prove the fraud, which is going to easy to do with fake companies and fake names. Done with intent to defraud, and that's where they're going to get a little hung up. And the federal government, the federal courts have a very specific rule about intent, about fraud, and they want it pled very, very specifically. So I think the next thing you're going to see in this case is likely going to be a motion to dismiss the complaint on the grounds that it did not meet the grand jury standard. And the grand jury standard is quite low. But it is probable cause. So it's a little bit less probable cause than you'd need for a search warrant or for arrest of someone, but it's a probable cause standard. And but it is a low standard, but I think we've seen enough of these cases they've tried to bring not make it through that I think the grand jury system still is functioning.
Yeah, so isn't it is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they're trying to prosecute someone and they want to be very certain that isn't that when they bring it to a grand jury, when they're like, I'm not sure, let's bring it to a grand. Okay, thank you.
No, there's two ways to get cases into court. And the route you take depends on the crime you're charging and the jurisdiction you're in. And so, in some ways, if you have what they call a show cause hearing or a probable cause hearing, that's one way that has been used to get cases into court. And I'm talking about bigger cases now, not little ones. And so you'd have to show probable cause, in a court hearing, and they would have to have, that would be the case of a police officer brings a complaint. Then in some states, you have a little court hearing afterwards, to see was there probable cause for the arrest. One small way. Then the complaint would issue. Federally, I think in some jurisdictions they can do that. They can do complaints, but indictments are going to be used when a crime's very serious. When they're going into federal court, they're going to want a grand jury indictment. Again, some states have a little bit of a different procedure, and it's going to be, they're going to have to meet that standard and put on evidence. So this to me looks like this would have taken them months to put the evidence in front of the grand jury.
Some are claiming that this looks like it's politically motivated.
One can certainly
concerns.
Hmm?
Do you
Oh,
feel like
listen,
those concerns are valid?
I have given up on that line of thought.
Okay,
I'm in Alice in Wonderland. Oh, it's an indictment. Oh, look what it says. Oh, I don't know. But so some say it's political. It could be, but it could, for all all we know, this could have been an indictment that was a grand jury, an investigation started by the FBI years ago. Even before Trump, it could have started. We don't know. And that's one of the things that would be great to know. So that's why I think they'll get the motion to dismiss to try to knock this out first on probable cause, insufficient evidence in front of the grand jury, or they'll allege some kind of, sometimes you can find evidence of this in certain kinds of ways state facilities prosecute irregularity in a grand jury. They might try, if there's something irregular about it. If that's denied, and I think it probably would be on the elements at this first pass, if that's all they had, but there's a rule 49, that the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, that the government has to show more. It's a really tight rule about really got to show intent. So they could still lose on not being specific enough. And that rule lets the defense attorneys ask for bills of particular, which are old-fashioned ways of saying, lay out specifically on this piece of paper every ounce of evidence you're using to prove this crime. Make it very specific. That would be great. That would be really interesting reading.
So the Southern Poverty Law Center has undergone a number of changes, the way that it's been operating in the past few years. You mentioned right at the start that you sit on the board of an organization called Wolf that has been deemed it's a hate organization based on Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah. And that gets picked up by Wikipedia,
So at some point, somehow, SPLC has turned its eye towards what I'm going to refer to as the gender critical movement, or sex realist movement, or women's rights movements. Right. And it turned its eye on these groups and has started claiming that these individuals and groups are part of similar hate groups as the KKK. Right. Are you familiar with how or when that pivot happened? Do you remember when Wolf got first?
I don't, I might not have been there. I have only been there since 2024. It could have happened before, but when this movement of, or takeover, I'm not sure what we call it in terms of the gender proponents. When this started and there would be protests, and then I don't know if you must remember. Yes, you remember. You've been harassed. You've had bugs thrown at you. You've had things thrown at you. You remember all that trouble, right? So
Yes.
that you could argue is linked to being designated a hate group if your group was a hate group. But I don't know when Wolf got in trouble for it. All we've done all along is stand for women's rights in an affirmative sense. So yes, we do not want men in women's spaces, and we believe that there are two solid biological sexes, and that's it. And gender's a construct, and now we're a hate group.
But I mean, before gender, before Wolf was like fighting for abortion access and
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it really came into being though around 2014, and that's right around when this all, so it has always fought for women's rights in terms of reproductive sovereignty and anti-violence, no pornography, abolition of pornography, abolition of prostitution, abolition of commercial surrogacy. So because of the way it used. So we're all about the material reality of the woman's body, and you believe you can't sell it and you can't harvest it to reap babies.
Is there a legal definition of a hate group?
Not that I know of. I think it'd be anyone I could find would be very. I'd have to look at hate statutes. There are any.
And how does Southern Poverty Law Center designate? Do they have a public criteria with which you have to meet for them to designate you?
I don't know. It was either they didn't like the fact that we were protesting pornography, or they didn't like the fact that we said men can't be women, which is what I'm leaning toward. So, we didn't get an invitation or an announcement or be advised of the criteria they used to decide this. I think it was enough that if we disagreed with them, that millions of trans people and children would disappear.
Did Wolf, that you know of, file anything legally to counter, or?
No, we get a lot of, not a lot, but from time to time we get allegations, that we are we're not pure enough in some way. And our position has always been not to engage on that. And so with this other, start trying to get them to say we're not a hate group seem pointless. No, we wouldn't necessarily do that unless it was going to be required under the rules for a 501c3.
Can you briefly just address legally the words defamation and what's the other one?
Libel or slander?
Yes, libel, slander, defamation.
Yeah, slander is oral. Libel is usually in writing, and defamation is what they both do. Meaning truth is going to be an absolute defense. So if they could prove all those, I don't know what they would prove to defend this. What would you prove?
That they didn't give hundreds of thousands of dollars to the KKK.
Well, I think more I'm just interested. Did the Southern Poverty Law Center, by claiming that individuals and groups that were gender critical or sex realist were, by deeming those hate groups, did they commit libel or slander against those individuals or groups? Do you think that there could have been, if Wolf wanted to take a case forward, could have been a case?
Sure. Because like I said, I suppose we could have, and we'd still be in court over that at the moment, and probably spend our entire 10-year budget on that. But we could, but it's not worth it, and it doesn't. I don't care what they think, really. We just have to not take them seriously anymore.
But
Well, this case might help.
But I do,
Yeah.
I do think there's something important here, though. So I know for Wolf, and we're going to talk to Jamie Mitchell, who leads Gays Against Groomers, and we're going to
Right.
talk to Colin Wright today also, who have both Gays Against Groomers and Colin Wright as an individual have also been named by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups. I know what you're saying legally, that the bar to take a case against them for defamation, libel, slander, all of those things would be so high. And like you said, it would have eaten your whole budget. But at the same time, do you think that that designation has harmed
I do.
parts of the movement?
Yes, because not everybody is aware of the Southern Poverty Law Center's peculiarities. And so somebody who's been used to giving them money since the 70s or something, like my partner, would have been surprised to find out that if they had designated somebody a hate group, they weren't really a hate group. They bring that credibility of, look, we fought the Klan. Look, we fought this, we fought that. When we say you're a hate group, you can count on us to tell you the truth. But I think everything's in question now with them.
Does it? Okay. Trans rights activists often will kind of run this almost like gauntlet of first they attack you, you don't know the evidence, you're making this up, no kids have been transitioned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But somehow through that gauntlet, for me, it seems like it always ends up with, oh, well, then you must just be a racist and you're a bigot.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about why or how those things somehow seem to have gotten tied up? And part of my thinking is that,
Yeah.
was there an intention from the Southern Poverty Law Center?
That will be the million-dollar question we would love to see answered, right? And how did they get tangled up? I think that it's if you look at the trans rights movement as an opportunistic or parasitic kind of organism, it sees diversity, equity, inclusion. We can go in on that horse, and then start claiming that that's what they're working under and that they're not, because when this started, when it began all the state laws started coming around at the same time. Everybody, I thought it's no big deal. Why we need a law? We don't have that many trans kids. We don't have that many trans people. This is a minuscule number. So wasn't alarming, but now it's alarming. It's got alarming a long time ago, but so I don't know if that answered your question. What was your question again?
It does, but I just wonder,
Is it worth it?
do you think
Oh,
there
how
was
does it
some
get mixed up?
intentionality? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because what they've done, I don't know if you've seen, and this one drives me crazy. The trans activists will say, you excluding me from the restroom is like excluding Black people from the restroom for whites. And it's a faulty analogy. It's got a lot of problems with comparison, but it's very simple. It's easy to hear and it's easy to retain. So it kind of comes under the category of, look, we were nice to those gay people. This isn't that different. And we don't want to hurt anybody like we did in the past. So I do think they've been very strategic. We know that, looking at Denton's document, looking at the other, I forget what the other, at WPATH, you can see there was a long-term strategy in here starting at the UN meetings, I think, or in somebody's attic. I forget whether it's Kinsey or whoever in the attic, but yeah, this could be part of a bigger plot, but I don't know how to prove anything like that anymore.
What do you think the outcome of this case could be?
Well, it could be dismissed. At which point then I would expect it would be dismissed in such a way that they could bring the case again. Like that's what they do to us for years. Oh no, we're going to dismiss this. You refile. You
Okay.
file, and then it takes them 5 years to dismiss it again. So they could dismiss it. We could have prolonged leaking and discovery coming out of either side. People will be all over the place. Now, I wonder what's going on in those groups they were paying, like they must be in turmoil, I think, or maybe they all knew and thought it was the biggest joke going that the Southern Poverty Law Center was funding their marches, right? Um, so they could end up getting guilty verdicts. It would be very hard to. I would think that some next steps that could end up happening is that maybe it would be the financial pressure would come down on Southern Poverty Law Center, and their donors would start withholding money, and their legal standing and their status and their ability to survive is going to be at jeopardy. So maybe they'll enter some kind of plea arrangement. Maybe the government will turn the IRS on them to say, you know what, this is really not a 501(c)(3) kind of activity. So let's have a look at everything and do a really thorough audit of what they've been doing. I'd like to know, I don't know, I haven't looked at their website in ages, but if they do represent anybody in court or hire lawyers for people, I don't know if they do. Or if they just have this watch list and it grows. One thing I think that is unfair from being listed like that, but again, do you want to stir up more little things that people can find on the internet, is donors. I'm sure donors Google us and say, oh, they're a hate group, pass. So yeah, I'm sure there's harm from it.
Can the Southern Poverty Law Center take its donor money to defend itself in court?
Good question. Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Does
So
does them being a 501(c)(3) offer other avenues of prosecution though? Because aren't 501(c)(3)s are very like heavily regulated with what they can and cannot do with money and how they have to disclose it.
Right.
Correct? So they really can be under a very fine-tooth comb right now.
Absolutely. That is absolutely true.
Welcome back to another guest segment this week, or maybe this is the first one, depending on which order you watch this week's broadcast in. So this week we have with us Colin Wright, who is a biologist, a man who knows how to define sex. And I think you've been a professional witness. You've given testimony in cases on what the definition of sex is.
I'm the professional assigner of sexes. Yeah. I've given testimony and expert testimony, witness, and been deposed by ACLU lawyers, all that about what male and females are.
And just to give you a quick test, Lauren is
Woman.
Female. And I am.
You are male.
Okay. I think you're qualified. Colin is also the editor of Reality's Last Stand, which is a Substack that publishes related materials to help keep people attached to reality. I'd say, Colin, you're also famous or infamous because you created a little political cartoon a few years ago that said, hey, I used to be on the left, but the left keeps getting further and further to the left, and now somehow I'm in the center.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who know me just for that cartoon, unfortunately. But any publicity is good, I suppose.
And I guess the final reason that you're famous is that you are a notorious, no good, terrible, evil, far-right bigot. At least that's what I hear when I check my sources from the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah, I'm an anti-LGBT hate monger. I'm an advisor for hate groups, and I use white supremacist language apparently, and to make all my points according to the SPLC. And I
That's
also am a peddler of junk science as well.
okay. Well, you have a wide-ranging resume. We're glad to talk to you, even though it might make you uncomfortable to be on the same program as a lesbian and as a disenchanted man who tried to transition.
I was on the doll cast with Brianna Wu and three other trans women, and it went great. So I
Yeah,
think I'm pretty good.
I guess we're
I think I can
pinkwashing.
handle it.
I guess it'll be okay. So tell us about this. We talked about this a little bit in our weekly segment, but give us your take on what's going on with the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Well, my take is that they've been just a terrible, politicized, ideologically captured organization, at least since I've been speaking about the biology of sex and speaking out against gender ideology. Some people say they had an original founding and they had, there were real causes that they were responding to, but it has since morphed um, into them playing this kind of pivotal role, I think, on the left, which is they use sort of this good reputation that they built up back when, you know, there was like significant like real racism in society, making good civil rights cases and getting wins. And now they're just using sort of that gained credibility to just um, really smear certain political opponents they have, just because when you read like what other organizations like maybe Media Matters or even the New York Times or other places, when they talk about people like me or anyone who's in the quote gender critical movement, it's, they can just always include in those lines, they're a designated hate group by the SPLC, or SPLC has deemed them to be an advisor for a hate group or whatever. It's just a way where they can just sort of pepper in all these things to immediately make the readers be like, this person is evil or this organization is evil. And it had real consequences. I mean, like they had, I think Amazon, whether or not certain books or certain products could be would qualify for like their affiliates, program where people would get paid for selling them, had to do with like, do these organizations, are they on the approved list that the SPLC put out there? So it has real world consequences, and they're just able to sort of smear people like this. And now it turns out that there's this big case, this FBI investigation, that they were funneling money to a lot of these, hateful groups, the KKK, and I can't remember the whole list, Proud Boys, and all these other, groups that are considered like these white supremacist groups, having informants in there. But their informants were like actually organizing some of these events that, things like Charlottesville, these major sort of catalyzing moments that we've had just in the last, 15 years or so. And it turns out maybe to some degree these were largely astroturfed. And, it's kind of ironic, I think, that you have this organization that like, they need to keep the donation money coming in. They realize that the sort of the supply of racism and bigotry is, not as big as the demand for it for their donors and for them to keep their lights on. And so they literally have to sort of prop up these groups that they're claiming to oppose just to sort of justify their own existence in combating those things. So it's just totally icky all the way through. Um, and it's pretty much what I would expect from them because they've been so captured ideologically.
So we talked about this in our last segment a little bit. For me, in my head, previously to this article dropping, gender was what broke SPLC for me, right? But with what's coming out now, it's not just this one topic. So that's why they targeted you, but it's clearly, when you say ideological, and we talk a lot on this show about gender ideology, but it's clearly a broader ideology that they've kind of got wrapped up in, right? Because it wasn't about gender particularly, it was about literally funding old school KKK. So where do you think this is coming from? Because it's gender is a part of it, but there's something else. There's this like omni cause, and they seem to be one of one of the bigger, I mean, it's a huge nonprofit. It's historical. So
No,
they have a big engine to propel this, whatever this ideology you're talking about. And I agree that there is something, but what do we call it?
I mean, I just colloquially refer to that omni cause, that, that hydra of social justice is kind of, I call it wokeness, even if it's a vague term. But really it comes down to like this form of critical social justice, I think maybe more of a specific term for it, which is, this approach to social issues that really paint everything in black and white terms as oppressor versus oppressed. This can be, man and woman, and gender, and trans and cis. Part of the Omni cause has always been racial issues for a long time. They've been pushing all the DEI and quote unquote anti-racist ideology that we're familiar with Kendi. It's just sort of a reverse racism, which is just it's just racism. Racial quotas, that type of thing. Part of the stuff they accused me of was, in addition to my stances on sex being real and gender ideology being nonsensical, was, that I'm parroting these white supremacist talking points. I mean, they included me in, so every year they put out this report on like this year in hate. It's like a big report. And it has, background of the images, cars on fire and things like that, with a family of, multiracial family all huddling together, hugging one another, and then it's got like, the white supremacist in the background. So I'm in that, apparently. And it's just one of those, it's just another label they can attach onto you as part of their smear machine. He's a racist, he's a transphobe, he's anti-LGBT. You can just go down the list. There's probably tons more things they can accuse you of. And I think that's just pretty much what the SPLC is involved in. They've turned into this smear machine, and they'll pull any lever they can to smear you, whether it's racial issues or sex and gender, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's all under the umbrella of like that critical social justice movement, and they're on the progressive woke side on all those issues.
Why are they doing that? What is their, like, somebody has to decide, hey, I'm gonna add Colin Wright's name to this. What do you think their motivation is?
It's a way that they can pre-stigmatize people. Because that was put on the list in like 2023, I think. There might have been, the junk signs might have been 2022, maybe even 2021 actually. But I see that they do this to a lot of people who even aren't like major players in these movements. And it's a way where they can just sort of pre-stigmatize people, like, you've been included in this list. You've been identified as this hateful person, where now if people Google you, what's going to come up is SPLC this year in hate 2020, whatever. And for a lot of people, I think that's kind of enough to make them shut up forever. People like me who are employed by a think tank, who make money independently on Substack, who are more difficult to cancel. Like, we don't care so much. And in some ways, it's just like a badge of honor. We go like, did I make the list on this new hate watch website? Like, oh, I did. And we laugh about it. But for a lot of people who aren't trying to be public figures, who aren't, funded by think tanks or have a Substack, like, it's pretty devastating to them to be included on this list by a supposedly reputable organization, as someone who's peddling hate and white supremacy and transphobia, and they're anti-LGBT. And I think it works probably much more effectively than people who are on Twitter and stuff might give credit to, because I think the average person would be mortified to be on some of these lists.
Yeah, I'm not on that list, but I've been targeted by the Media Matters for America,
Yeah.
being described as a Holocaust denier because I challenged the idea that there was a trans community in a legible sense in the 1930s, 1940s Germany, in the sense that we think of the trans community. So that didn't exist back at that point. So they did a write-up on me describing me as a Holocaust denier.
I mean, that's what, I mean, they're doing the same thing. Media Matters is also like a smear machine. Like, I criticized the Trevor Project one time because they were caught having some of their, people in the chat rooms like steer kids towards, gender ideology and gender surgeries, and like how you can get your hormones and things like that. I criticize that, and of course I'm then portrayed by Media Matters as someone who's against a suicide hotline for, for gay teens. I'm just like, oh my God. It's like with the implication being that I want, gay youth to commit suicide.
Right. If you criticize the operation of the organization, that somehow transfers to a criticism of the mission of the organization. Doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
but it's easily conflated. I do want to provide a little bit of background information here because I'm just pulling up the tax filings for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Their most recent filings are 2024. I'm going to go back 10 years before that, just to compare and contrast. In 2014, their revenue was $54.4 million, which is a lot.
Still a lot of money. That's so much.
It's a lot. In 2024, it was 129 million.
Well,
and that reflects about a doubling of their revenue after the election of Donald Trump.
I mean, it's not surprising. They have the amount of money that people just throw at these organizations based on like their historic, legacy or whatever is just astronomical. What's even most shocking is how comparatively less funding that any of the gender critical organizations get. Like, I don't know what the funding situation is for like GenSpect. I would assume maybe a couple million, maybe. If that, I don't know. I would assume the LGBT Courage Coalition that you guys are part of, I would assume it's nowhere, orders of magnitude smaller than what the SPLC is getting. Many orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
I mean, we all, even at, I'm at the Manhattan Institute and they, they're a big think tank, but the money that they allot for gender issues is not that much. There's just me, Leor Sapir, and two other people who are working on these issues. So comparatively, so small. But
we
we're
could actually
much more effective too.
We could actually all probably make more money by being informants to the SPLC and having them funnel money into our organizations than
Yeah, I know.
we are
That's how they can take advantage of
actual
people.
donations for.
Yeah, it's just shocking to me. But we're effective because we have like, I guess truth and honesty on our side. And I've seen some of the articles that SPLC puts out, and it's just like these modified blog posts from some activist, and it's just like the full of typos and just formatting errors. And it's like, what is all this money going towards? I mean, apparently some of it's going to the KKK. But still, I mean, if they're making 120 something million dollars a year, they could afford to have a copy editor to at least make the stuff they're putting out look good.
Their expenses are about equal to their revenue. So they spend about $129 million a year. That's a lot of money.
Because they're a nonprofit. They have to. So they're just, I mean, they're literally making stuff up to fight against at this point.
Yeah. Apart from their payments to their informants, basically, what is the word? Controlled opposition? Is that the terminology? I think that's right.
I think that applies.
They're basically they are creating the monsters that they fight, because fighting monsters is good business sense.
Yeah, it's like if you own like a private firefighting agency, and you're going out there and just starting fires, just to justify
which happens.
People to
which
call
has
you.
happened.
Yeah.
That's like a historical thing. I know people would be shocked to hear that was a historical thing, but it still happens.
Yeah,
Firefighters.
I mean, it's all the incentive structures, and right now all the incentives is to make racism, make it seem like we're in the 1950s, Jim Crow era again, and that's kind of their goal. They have this nostalgia for that time because that's when people felt this great sense of purpose, and now people are looking for that purpose, and they want to be these civil rights crusaders because they're kind of hailed as these icons of America, for very good reason. But it's just not that time anymore. It's not to say that racism is over, but we've improved so much, but they can't even acknowledge that we've made progress, because to acknowledge progress is to say like, well, maybe we don't need to get funded as much anymore. It always has to be like, it's worse than ever. It's more racist. They're not lynching people in the street, but it's gone covert. It's now just sort of this, systemic racism. It's just everywhere. We can't really point to it, but it's in the system. It just becomes more and more impossible to measure, but equally as potent apparently. That's kind of the game they're playing.
One of the things that I can't not notice is that the name of the organization is the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they spend $129 million a year. How much of that is going to pulling Southerners out of poverty?
I would imagine probably zero. Yeah.
Well, I bet you some of those KKK guys live in the South. So.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose that's a question that probably the federal government's going to try to answer is if you've spent $500 million in the last 5 years, that's about what I'm looking at in their tax filings here. Where'd the money go?
Yeah.
$500 million, that solves poverty for a lot of people.
It seems like there should be some rule for maybe some type of NGOs, especially civil rights ones, if they're set up to defeat some kind of foe. I feel like there just needs to be some kind of clause in the organization where it's just like, okay, if you achieve your goal, and you need to specify, pre-specify your goals, and once it's achieved, it's just like a self-terminating clause that, okay, we're shuttering the doors now and we're moving on. Because if you don't have these organizations shut down at some point, it's just, it's just this search for more money, like, Spaceballs type of thing. Where it just becomes a racket. They just have to keep reinventing themselves, and they get to the point where we are now, which is where they literally have to fund their enemies into existence in order to justify like keeping the lights on. So, yeah, it's a bad situation.
Well said.
I stumbled on, I don't have a reference to it at my fingertips, unfortunately, but I stumbled on this other group that was commenting on how terrible it is that the Southern Poverty Law Center had been charged by a grand jury. And I went and looked at the mission of this other group. It was supposed to be a Jewish rights group. And I looked at the mission, and it's become the omni-cause. Gun control and anti-Islamophobia and anti-transphobia and it's like it doesn't have the focus on the Jewish group. It has the focus on everybody else.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm like, what is the mission of this group anymore? And this kind of reminds me, in fact, even the human rights HRC, what does the C stand for anymore? Human Rights Commission? Campaign? Human Rights Campaign. I don't know why that just... The Human Rights Campaign is also like anti-gun now. Why?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be gay rights. Why'd they move into anti-gun? I don't understand why these groups have to drive in so many different lanes. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It was, I think it was even more specific than that. It was gay marriage. It was very specific.
It actually was.
Yeah.
It's kind of the pathway. I mean, I saw Wilfred Riley. You guys know who he is. He, I mean, he even mentioned, in terms of, he thought he was donating money with his, I guess, a previous girlfriend of his to some like panda rescue website where it's like, you get to send money and they assign you a panda and you get to see pictures, whatever. But when they dug deeper into it, it was just like, okay, well, your money doesn't really go to that panda. There's a bunch of people who get assigned the same panda. And, like the pandas only eats bamboo and that's not very expensive. So like 99% of the money doesn't even go to the pandas. It goes to just funding various green causes. You might be funding whale watchers where they're just like, trying to destroy whaling ships or something else. Or just, you could be paying organizations that pay individuals to go and, destroy a painting at the Louvre or something because it's, Extinction Rebellion stuff. You don't know where this money goes once you give it to these organizations because it just gets funneled into this broad, climate activism space. Same with HRC. You think you're, protecting gay marriage. It's now you're funding, children's access to cross-sex hormones in Illinois. Yeah, you have no idea.
Yeah, there's one thing that we have to keep in mind about these groups. This isn't a specific criticism of their ideology, but we have a lot of college graduates who study things that are not necessarily of they're not STEM. They don't help industry. They're really all of this sort of knowledge production type of degrees, where it's really more opinion production. Actually, that's something else that you do, Colin, is you take down some of these crazy academic papers that get published, but they're spending 4, 6, 8 years studying things that really have no real world impact. They get out of school, they have to have a job somewhere. A lot of them go into these NGOs.
Yeah, and they have PhDs because they interviewed themselves in an autoethnography about their gender journey. Not even making that up. This is
Right.
types of dissertations that I come across almost daily when I'm searching. I'm on Google Scholar. You can just search for ProQuest dissertations that come out, and not from fringe universities. These are from like University of California, from very, very good universities that are putting these things out. I think I highlighted a piece recently that was literally, it was in a real like Rutledge, Taylor and Francis journal that was basically equating J.K. Rowling to Voldemort because she became apparently like the demon that she was
Wow.
originally denouncing or whatever. And this is in like a peer-reviewed journal. And it concluded literally by calling J.K. Rowling a muggle. So that's where
Wow.
we are in terms of like academic, excellence and what we're, rubber stamping PhDs for. And I mean, I
That
just had a piece come out recently that talked about a lot of people on Twitter, they say, or X, they think that woke is gone, woke is over or something. Well, one, it's a lot of it's on blue sky, but also second, you're not seeing it because if you're just looking at your social media feed, if you're just looking at the news, you're not really seeing like where the wokeness is happening right now, like what they're doing. They sort of shifted into this consolidation phase where I think they're really just putting out so much crap in the academic literature because they know that if they can just flood the zone with total ideological BS and sex pseudoscience, judges have to base their claims off like the best available scientific research. And so if they can
yeah.
say that, gender affirming care is this, prevents kids from committing suicide and, sex is a spectrum and it's mutable and whatever it is, they can just basically control policy because they control what the perception of consensus is on these topics. And that's kind of what they're doing. And I'm trying to make wave all these signals and tell people like we need to be focusing on this because only a handful of people are actually like publishing counter responses in the scientific literature uh, that judges can actually use to say like, well, this it's not entirely true that you know sex is this n-dimensional hypercube uh, that includes your gender identity. So it's an issue.
Colin, you are one of the most well-known academics who are trying to bring about a correction in academia. But I know that you have a very large lay audience as well. For anybody who's listening to or watching Informed Dissent this week, what is the best way for them to learn more about your work?
I would say follow me on X, so at swipe right, WRIGHT. And then really I have so many articles on this topic by both myself and other biologists on my website. It's realitiesLastStand.com. You can search for a recent article that I wrote in a real scientific journal, the Archives of Sexual Behavior. And the article is literally just titled Why There Are Exactly Two Sexes. And it is now, I think, the ninth most read article in that journal,
Wow.
the journal's history. So it's gone pretty viral just because, there just hasn't been a lot of people just making the basic claim again for what science is or for what sex is, just as you don't tend to see like a lot of papers that just come out and say like, here's why evolution actually happens. It's like biology has moved beyond asking whether or not like evolution's real to like, finding out more small details of it. Same thing with sex. Like no serious biologists are asking, wait, what is sex again? What is a male or a female? It's like, no, we've moved beyond it. Now we're asking questions about how did it evolve? What are different selection pressures that cause these different traits to evolve in different species or whatever? But since a lot of activists are now sort of trying to undermine the foundation, I had to write an article that just lays out the basics again, that people can use, and hopefully it can be used for judges and court cases and all that. So I would tell people to go look over there on my website and in the journal.
Thank you very much. It was excellent having you on, and hopefully we'll have you back before too long.
Awesome. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
All right, and we are back with our third guest of the day on Informed Dissent. We are here with Jamie Michelle from Gays Against Groomers. Jamie, you mind introducing yourself to our audience in case they might not know who you are?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Jamie Michelle. I'm the founder and president of the organization Gays Against Groomers. I mean that's my main title, but I could go on, but that's where people probably would know me from if they know me at all.
And what does your organization focus on?
Right. So we are comprised of all LG and B individuals, and we are fighting back from inside the community against the sexualization, indoctrination, and medicalization of children being done under the guise of LGBTQ plus rights. We've been going strong since 2022, June of 2022. I actually launched the organization unintentionally on D-Day. So we've been going since June 6th, 2022, and we've had a lot of success. The fight isn't over, but things are obviously, I feel like we finally have the wind at our back here, but there's still a lot of problems, and I'm sure you guys know that very well.
Absolutely. So we wanted to have you on because of this Southern Poverty Law Center investigation that's going on, because your organization particularly has really kind of suffered under the designation from Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe how you got designated, why
Yeah,
you think that happened, when it happened, the resulting fallout from it?
definitely. I forget the exact date. I think it was back in 2023. But all of a sudden woke up one day, and I had tons of people contacting me. I guess it had already been written up because it was so ridiculous. They classified us as anti-LGBTQ. One of those hate groups, a very specific niche of hate, being anti ourselves, when in reality, all we're trying to do is protect kids. And that wasn't the first time somebody labeled us anti-LGBTQ. Ever since we started, it was kind of like the only line of attack that the other side had, because they can't really win on the argument. And the pretty much game plan for these monsters who are doing this to children, since the beginning of this agenda, has been to just label opponents of it as anti-LGBTQ, homophobic, transphobic, extremist, bigots, you name it. But, Gays Against Groomers popped up, and they couldn't do that as easily, even though they try. Like, as you can tell, I mean, they labeled us anti ourselves, which is ridiculous, and everybody knows that's ridiculous. It doesn't stick quite as well as, like a straight Christian mom and dad that go up to a school board meeting, and, those labels don't stick as well, but they still try, and that's what the SPLC did to us. And yeah, it was brutal, honestly. I mean, this was right very early on in the early days of the organization. We exploded onto the scene. I never expected that. I thought maybe in 6 months to a year we'd have like 5,000 followers. Maybe a little blog would write about us. But within 3 months of launching, I was on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News. We had like 500,000 followers. This was pre Crazy Tucker, but that's a topic for a whole different. And so I don't, he wasn't this way when I went on there back in his Fox News days. But so it exploded, and I think that all of these big groups, I mean, they obviously took notice, and they panicked. They were like, "Well, how are we going to stop these guys?" I started Gays Against Groomers because I felt like voices from inside the community could be the most effective at fighting back against this because the labels don't stick as well. And because they can't, I mean, we're gay, like you're doing this in our name. And yes, we do have the lived experience. And, in the early days, Gays Against Groomers even had trans people because I initially just wanted to fight this the most effective way. And I was like, even trans people, I don't have that experience. Gay people don't. So them speaking out was very important to me in the beginning too, but it's just, evolved and now it's just the LGB for us. But yeah, so they labeled us extremists. They put us in their extremist files. They put us on their hate map. And major companies, platforms, corporations all over the country and even world got the memo very quickly. And we were subsequently banned in total, I think we were banned from about 15 or 16 platforms over the years from that. Like that kind of was the first domino. And then like it gave justification to these companies that were looking for an excuse, I'm sure, for a reason to censor us and to suspend us. But yeah, very quickly after that, the dominoes continued to fall. And the biggest one, I woke up one day and my email, I had two emails. No, I had three, one from Google, one from PayPal, and one from Venmo. And we had been banned from all of them like within an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. PayPal owns Venmo. So like that was like just together. But Google was also very shocking. I mean, we used their email services at the time. Like we didn't have our own email. We were so immature as a group and like just unprepared for our explosive growth. Like we were just functioning very basically. The next day we raised hell, or later that day we raised hell and Google gave it back to us. But to this day, we, and me personally, actually, it's Gays Against Groomers, the organization, and myself are both banned from PayPal and Venmo still. So
Wow.
because of what the SPLC started and all the other, big organizations and groups just echoing that, we were very affected. I mean, we from day one have never taken and still have never taken large donor money ever. Like our average donation is like $40 and people just donate on our site. We sell merch. Like that's literally it compared to these massive groups. I mean, it was revealed that the SPLC, after fabricating these or funding these hate hoaxes, basically, they raise like $133 million in a year. Like we are a baby compared to that still. Like our highest year was barely reaching six figures. And that's like, I mean, that was in our peak, like when we, and very small donors. And so, yeah, it severely hindered our ability to fundraise. It severely restricted our reach because we were taken off social media platforms. We made a TikTok account. I posted one video on there and we got banned. We got, even our hashtag is banned to this day. Like you can't
Wow.
put hashtag gays against groomers on TikTok. Like so it's just, sorry, I could go on and on and on, but like it had real ramifications. And honestly, I'm considering like maybe filing a lawsuit against them because now, I mean, I was considering it in the first place, but now it's like, well, you really, I mean, the hypocritical aspect of it is just so extreme and also just fraudulent. I mean, literally breaking the law. And I hope that they go down. I mean, I don't know how they survive this, but I'd be happy. It would bring me a lot of joy to help in, taking them down and putting the nail in their coffin.
Jamie,
Yeah.
I just want to characterize and see if you agree with this. I think Gays Against Groomers, its major activity is just expressing viewpoints.
Literally, that's it.
And the way I see it is that anytime you have a Q in LGBTQ, that's essentially it's not a sexual orientation. It's a leftist political view. It's like a Marxist political view. And in some ways, you are against like this postmodernist infusion mixed into the gay movement. And that's mostly what you do is criticize this Marxist viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, that's very hurtful to all gays and lesbians, I think. I always said when I started Gays Against Groomers, it was twofold. It was to first and foremost, like protect kids. This is barbaric what's being done to them, especially in our name. but also to help ourselves, like to save ourselves, not only because, I mean, this is destroying our good standing in society that I feel like we fought for so long and our elders, fought for so long to achieve in society, and not even 10 years later, like when this all started, it was like 7 years after gay marriage was finally federally legalized. Like now we're back, and it's almost like this TQ plus and the rest of the never-ending acronym is proving the actual bigotry right. It's like the people who used to warn of the slippery slope of gay marriage. So yeah, it's been a big problem, and we were trying to just all we did was speak out. I mean, we held a few rallies here and there, I'd go testify and so would other members, but like, yeah, just voicing opinions. That was it. Like we never held one of these KKK or Charlottesville type things where we were instigating and that the SPLC funded. It was never like that. Like we literally primarily just exist online and would voice our opinions. Yeah.
I think the SPLC designation of your group particularly hits on something that you were saying, and I think that is like, like you said, you guys weren't pulling in millions of dollars. You
No.
guys are barely making six figures, if that, and in terms of nonprofits, that's not a lot.
No.
But the potency and the effectiveness of LGB voices, particularly in this, is probably why they targeted you.
Oh,
Right?
for
Like, I mean, they know that if it comes from within the community, they can't paint it as, like you said, anti-LGBTQ.
sure.
Anyone who sees gays against groomers as anti-LGBTQ is, I mean, that's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. So,
Right. But it goes to show like that is still the only line of attack they have, even though it
yeah,
is absolutely ridiculous. And like
yeah,
even the people who write it and who label us this, I don't think they actually believe it. Like, we're I don't personally care what adults do unless they're like, violating boundaries or spaces. But, if you're not hurting anybody, whatever, or trampling over rights, I don't care. I don't care. There's too many damn people in the world. They all have different interests. If you want to, in my opinion, butcher your body to try and alleviate mental health symptoms, then whatever, do it. Plastic surgery is legal, but it's just leave the kids alone. That was always the red line in society and for us. I mean, and so we're not anti-LGBTQ in any sense. We're just anti-child sexualization, mutilation, sterilization, all these things. And they conflate the two, and they're not at all. And so yeah, it was a real big problem for them when we came on this scene. And I think how quickly we exploded in growth, which still shocks me to this day. I mean, we were literally playing catch up for like a year, just trying to keep up with the pace of things. I think that went to show just how needed our voices were from inside the community, like saying, your everyday, your neighbor, your gay neighbor, your
yeah.
gay, whatever, doctor, like just people who exist in society and live their lives like everybody else, not trying to push anything on anyone. Like pretty much everybody knows somebody like that, I'm sure, in their lives. And so, but the overwhelming narrative that got all the attention was just that all of us felt the same way and wanted and were just on board with what was being done. And so, yeah, I think, Gays Against Groomers proved how needed our voices were. And I've been so pleasantly like overwhelmed with happiness to see so many more LGB voices speak up and groups launch, since we started. And I think we're making great progress, honestly. Who knows what's going to happen if, the other party gets in office, in power in a few years. But I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of work to do for a long time. But like, obviously, it's kind of like simmered down a lot compared to what we were dealing with.
Yeah, the conversation has at least been opened.
Oh yeah, it's like not a radical view anymore to say children shouldn't have their healthy body parts cut off, before they're old enough to get a tattoo. So, yeah, it's really crazy stuff. Like who could ever think that way? It's so stupid. The whole thing
Yeah,
was so stupid.
growing up as a young lesbian, did you ever think that you were going to be specifically targeted by the
Oh my
Southern
God.
Poverty Law Center? Like, could
Dude,
that
it's
ever?
crazy. My life
Yeah.
honestly became very crazy very fast. Like Caitlyn Jenner Bruce started like targeting me for political reasons, just very crazy things. I wake up regularly. I'm like, really? This is what I have to deal with now. But yeah, it's weird. And no, and more than that, I never thought as a young lesbian growing up that children who were just like me, tomboys, would be told that they were born in the wrong body. And honestly, that was
Yeah.
a big motivator for me in starting the group, because I'm like grateful every single day that I was born when I was and not a few decades later, because I would have 100%, I know for a fact I would have believed this. And it
Yeah.
had my parents, like,
Same.
about myself. Like I wear men's clothes today to this day. I don't, I've always been an androgynous tomboy, and that's perfectly okay. But, and it terrifies me, because if my parents, which they're not, but if they were, they don't believe in this stuff, but if they did, if just things were different and cosmically I was dropped off with parents that believed in this stuff and wanted to, believe the doctor's lies about having a living son or a dead daughter, like, this would have been me. I would have
Yeah.
been left. I would have been a detransitioner, now with missing body parts. And so it's always been a very personal fight to me. And the SPLC and all these others, they tried to silence us, but that didn't work. So
And
yeah,
here we all are.
here we are. We're gonna keep going, and I appreciate you guys, all the work you do too against it.
Yeah, we appreciate you too. Thank you for coming and telling your story.
Of course, I'd be happy to come back anytime. Just reach
Yes,
out.
please do.
All right, you guys take care.
All right.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
This podcast is produced by the LGB Courage Coalition, a registered United States nonprofit fully funded by small donations like yours. We work to promote evidence-based medicine, ending the medicalization of gender nonconformity, and advocating for LGB rights. Supporting this show means supporting that work directly. If what you heard today mattered to you, please like, subscribe, and pass it along. Word of mouth is how independent shows like this one survive. You can reach us in the Substack comments section or by email at lgbcouragecoalition@gmail.com or through the contact page on our website at lgbcourage.org. We want to hear from you. And until next week, stay informed and ready to dissent.